Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mack. Today I'm joined by Noa Dalzell of SB Nation's Celtics Blog. How you doing, Noah?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on such short notice. Man, we had a heck of a game last night between my Cleveland Cavaliers and the team that you cover in the Boston Celtics. I like to think of this matchup as being pretty competitive as of late. Is that your main takeaway in most of these matchups that we've seen lately?
Yeah, definitely. I think last year the season series was very competitive, and I anticipated last night would be a close one and a competitive one, and it certainly turned out that way.
Yeah, I felt like it did. After Cleveland got off to such a hot start, I know Boston was coming off of a couple of days rest. So I'm just thinking to myself the entire time during the start of that first quarter, man, when is this barrage of shots going to come that we know that Boston is perfectly capable of hitting any team with? And it came in that second quarter where we really start to saw Boston kind of get into its groove. What would you say was the biggest factor for Boston yesterday?
Yeah, it was a weird game. They looked asleep in the first quarter, and I was thinking to myself, maybe we're gonna watch this team be blown out for the first time this year. I think the one thing about this Celtics group is that they're kind of always in it. Even when they lose, it usually goes down to the wire. It's very, very rare for them to just be blown out. And so I think what ended up being the deciding factor is that Jaylen Brown was able to keep the minute in the first quarter. He was actually the only person that could score, so he had 10. And then in the second quarter, I think Derek White hit three threes in like a minute span, and then Tatum had 13. So it's kind of like they took turns, and that's the challenging thing about facing up against the Celtics is that you can't just stop one guy. They're gonna kind of take turns. And first quarter was all JB, second quarter was Tatum and Derek White, and then in the second half, Porzingis like woke up and came to life and I think he had 19 points in the second half. And so it was an even effort in the sense that everyone had their part of the game that they dominated, and it was almost like players were going on personal runs, in a way. And that's the challenging thing about matching up with this roster, and it's probably what Brad Stevens had in mind when he designed this roster is that Tatum can struggle for a half, or even Porzingis can struggle for a few games, or and that sort of thing, but they have enough star power to actually make up for it in other ways. So yeah, yesterday that was enough, and it's not always going to be enough, but they have the best record in the league right now, so it has been enough for most nights.
Yeah, and going into Boston, that's an entirely different beast as well. There were two real things that I was a little afraid of heading into this matchup. First was the length of this Boston starting five, especially when you add Drew Holiday into the mix, when you already have a terrific defender on the court and Derek White, and Jaylen Brown is no slouch himself. And I feel like Jason Tatum and Kristaps have both improved over the duration of their careers on that end of the court as well. But adding a defender the caliber of Drew Holiday, I was a little afraid that that matchup between the two backcourts that would end up playing a big role. But I didn't necessarily see that. So the other thing that I was kind of worried about is with Evan Mobley missing the game, I was really wondering how Cleveland would kind of manage to work against Kristaps, and it seemed to work at least in the first half. But then he broke out in that second half, right? And one of the big things that he was able to do down the stretch, especially midway through the fourth, was get to the line. And that's my next thing. And I think much as I don't know if you've seen it as much as I have, but there has been much ado against about the free throw disparity in this matchup. How much of that do you feel like played an impact in this game overall? Because while I feel like it played a factor, I really honestly felt like this was a really good game between two really good teams.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was an enormous disparity that can't be denied. I've been thinking a lot about free throw disparity in general because I think a lot of times fan bases will be like, oh, the Lakers, they have the best whistle in the league. They always have more free throws than their opponent, but in reality, it's about like they're drawing more fouls, right? They're not taking three-pointers. Historically, the Celtics have not been one of those teams that's super dominant from the free throw line. I think something that Porzingis adds is that ability to draw fouls kind of like at mercy, like whenever he wants to. It's almost like he can get that switch and he can get contact. And he's gotten really good at that. And he's talked a lot about how he didn't used to be. And so from that perspective, like that's kind of what he's done for this group all year. Like down the stretch, this is a Celtics core that has struggled. It's probably why they don't have a championship, is because they haven't had good late game offense, and it's kind of like a cheat code. Like I think he was 6 for 6 in the fourth quarter last night, and that's not the first time this year that the fourth quarter offense kind of became like Porzingis is kind of taking over mismatches, things like that. Um, that being said, I don't know where I haven't seen as much conversation around the Fraser disparity. Did you feel like from a more of a Cavaliers perspective that there were missed calls or things like that, or more just like looking at the box score, it was kind of astounding?
Just looking at the box score, there are obviously,
Yeah.
as we're all biased, in
Right,
regards to specific teams. But no, I didn't feel like it played like a tremendous impact on the game. There were calls where I'm just like the
yeah,
technical on Donovan Mitchell when when it appeared that the ball kind of rolled off of Kristaps. I think it was near the end
yeah,
of the second quarter, stuff like that. But I didn't necessarily feel like it played a huge role in the game overall. I felt like it was just a contrast in two stylistic differences. Cleveland,
yeah, exactly.
we're not doing too well from a 3-point percentage standpoint, but they got the shots up last night, and I think they actually outshot Boston. But
Yeah,
there were a couple of things that I felt turned the tide of the game for the Celtics. One, the rebounding battle. I was already having concerns without having Evan Mobley out there that Cleveland would kind of struggle in that regard, and they did. I think they allowed Boston to pretty much double them up on the offensive boards, and that is
yeah,
definitely, although these second chance opportunities, it's not as if Boston took advantage of them. Getting those extra opportunities is one less possession for the Cavs. So it was definitely something. They're like small things. It wasn't just the
yeah,
free throw disparity. It was many other things that I felt played a much bigger impact in regards to why Boston won that game. Um, Heading into Thursday's matchup, do you think that that Boston should change up anything that they were able to accomplish, like the game plan?
I mean, probably a much better start, hopefully. I think they've been the best first quarter team in the league, so it's quite unusual for them to come out like that. That being said, it's a game of runs, so I think even if they had come out strong, Cleveland would have punched back at some point. I think they threw a ton of defensive schemes at Cleveland, and some were more effective than others. I'm curious kind of what they'll stick with moving forward, tomorrow. Derek White touched on this in the post game. He said, the team that loses when you have these kind of like 2 game series during the regular season, that team usually comes out and plays better in the second game because they have that motivation, or, they feel like they have to improve more and like that they can't get that complacent. But I definitely think that'll be the case, even though the players acknowledge it. I'm sure Cleveland's going to come out with a lot of energy. I think it's hard to beat a team two times in a row. After this series against the Cavs, they have 2 games against the Magic. Celtics do, so it's kind of like a weird 4 game homestand. So we'll see. I think generally speaking, the game plan will look the same, but probably I expect a little bit more of an efficient night from Porzingis and Tatum and some of the guys that were struggling early on. Um, but we'll see.
I gotta say, I hope it doesn't happen, right? Just from a Cavalier standpoint, but I could certainly see that being the case. They got off to a slow start and then turned things on. Like you said to begin, Jaylen Brown really kept them in it. I believe he scored Boston's first 7 points, and then he had kind of a barrage to begin the third quarter as well, which allowed other guys to get hot. One of the things that Cleveland has kind of struggled with to begin this season is kind of honestly dates back to last year as well, is defending the 3-point line. Cleveland kind of deployed a zone at many instances last night, which kind of ticked me off, but Boston was kind of able to pick it apart. There was
Yeah.
one sequence in particular that kind of sticks out to me, and it was in that fourth quarter where things were kind of back and forth for the most part until midway through, where I believe it was Derek White. He was kind of left open, wide open in the left hand corner, and he just drilled a three, and it was just kind of it was kind of just encapsulated the entire night within itself to me. It's just like Cleveland kind of fought and scratched their way to regain the lead, and then it was just so much back and forth. And I think we could be in for a similar type of matchup on Thursday. But one question I did have for you is there anybody on this Boston Celtics roster that has kind of exceeded your expectations?
Yeah, a couple people. I would say Porzingis, I wasn't, I'm not someone that has been like I didn't closely follow his career before he came to Boston. Saw him a lot in Dallas, and he talks about that time of his career as like not something that he's particularly proud of. He's learned a lot from those years. So when they gave up Marcus Smart, who was a fan favorite, heart and soul of the team, drove the defense, it was a big loss for this group. I think a lot of people were skeptical that Porzingis was going to be able to contribute at the level that he has been contributing at, offensively and down the stretch. Like I don't know if they win that game last night if he doesn't come alive in the second half on a night where Tatum wasn't super efficient, where some things were kind of moving slow. He is like a cheat code for them, and he gives them a two-man game. Both Jaylen Brown, who's not known for being a playmaker, totally unlocks him, and they've been really really wonderful together. Pick and roll, all sorts of actions, just the two of them. So he's been a really positive surprise. I also think defensively he's a lot better than was advertised, and he's gotten a lot better throughout his career. He's a really solid rim protector. He might not be Robert Williams, but for what he provides on the offensive end, he's a really great two-way player. And then the other one is, it doesn't shock me because he had a great playoff performance too, but Derek White has just become like just an absolute fan favorite, and has just, I mean, I feel like every day there's a new article about how Derek White's like the breakthrough player of the year and all this stuff, but he's just been awesome. He's been awesome defensively. He was all defense second team last year. And then offensively, like you mentioned that corner shot that he hit. If I had to choose someone to take that shot in that moment, it would be Derek White. Like we all have kind of full faith in him and his abilities to deliver, and he kind of does all the little things, and then also has become just a really great shooter, which he wasn't earlier in his career. And then to have him with Drew Holiday like as his backcourt mate, yeah, it's a great defensive combo. But I would say like Porzingis from an acquisition standpoint exceeded expectations. Then Derek White's probably the returner that has made the biggest leap. And I'll give a quick shout out to Sam Hauser too, who
Yeah,
uh,
he killed
has
us.
just, yeah. Like I think the Celtics, everyone talks about their top six, like the starting five and then Al Horford coming off the bench. But really, like I've said this before, but I think Sam Hauser is kind of rounds out that seven of like he's clearly in the rotation. He's playing about 20 minutes a night. And I think he had three threes I don't know if it
In
was
the
in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was two in the fourth, and I was like, that was one of the guys that I was looking at coming into this matchup, where it's like he's hit like 44% of his threes
Yeah.
this
And he
season,
doesn't
and
need a
this
lot of space. Yeah. So
yeah
he's been huge for them. And the philosophy is all about getting threes up. That's Missoula's offense. And so you have to have guys that can actually shoot at a high rate. And not everyone on this group has been this year. So he's been a really important part of that offense.
Yeah, I've like one of the issues again, like I said, defending the 3-point line. So I was a little worried about how they would face off against, or how they would game plan rather, about, reserve like Hauser, who he's only playing 23 minutes a game, but he's shooting 44% from distance, and the bulk, I think 6.1 of his field goal attempts are coming from 3-point distance.
Yeah.
And it's like when you have a guy like that who's literally just coming in to shoot the 3-point shot, you have to D him up. You have to make sure that he has a body on him. And Cleveland was kind of lackadaisical about that last night as well. And that's kind of been a circumstance that continues to play itself out. So I'm hoping that that is not the case on Thursday, knowing now, having seen that on film, when matched up against him. I'm hoping he's not able to take advantage of that, but we'll see. Specifically in regards, just from an outside point of view, is there anybody on this Cleveland roster that you feel like has been better than expected for the Cavs? Is there anybody that kind of stands out in particular in regards to the new acquisitions?
I mean, it maybe Max Strus, just because I feel like the Heat have this reputation now for having these breakout guys for them, and then when they go to the next team, they don't do as well. And so I think when Max Strus signed that longer term contract, a lot of people were skeptical that he was going to be able to maintain that production. And so far, I think he's had a pretty good year for Cleveland. He certainly, from like a Celtics fan perspective and someone who's been closely following the team, it's like traumatizing to watch him shoot threes because it just reminds you of all those battles against Miami where these role players are going off. So I thought he looks good. I think he's a really solid all around player, and it's not that he's taken a huge leap from what he was doing last year, but just maybe in a new environment, it wasn't quite clear if he was going to be able to maintain that production, and obviously provides a really important like outside shooting that was lacking previously. So I think he maybe would stand out.
Yeah, he's definitely been my standout as well. Niang has actually been better, I feel like, than advertised, although he's not quite knocking down the three ball that he was, with
Yeah.
Philadelphia. But Max, man, like you said, he's not necessarily exploding on the stat sheet, when you're talking about the leap, but he's doing all the little things. He
Yeah.
he really is filling up the box score on a lot of these nights. And I think one of my biggest At the time of that acquisition, I felt like it was the right move to make, getting off of Jetty Osman and Lamar Stevens. Um, and when we acquired him, I was wondering how the movement shooting would actually impact the offense. It's obviously done that, but some of the other things that he's bringing to the table, the playmaking, the rebounding,
Yeah.
the defense is underrated. Although, as much as it pains me to say this, Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum got the best of him last night. So that definitely wasn't fun. But Max has definitely exceeded my expectations. Before we close out here, I just wanted to ask how you're feeling headed into that Orlando Magic matchup because Cleveland actually just faced off against them, and they're unique in the fact that they tried out, I want to say, a starting five where nobody is below 6'5". They got like 3 6'10" guys in their starting unit between Paolo and Gogo, and company. How are you feeling heading into that matchup?
I mean, the over the last few years, there's like the Magic have just had the Celtics number, even last year when they weren't as good. So, it was the Celtics' worst game of the season was in Orlando during the season tournament earlier last month. So, hopefully that's at their forefront and they'll come out with more energy. But I would not be surprised if they split that series or maybe even lost both. Just looking at the last few games, I'm not sure why. It's kind of like a joke in the Celtics fan base that if there's a team that we're afraid of going into the playoffs, it's Orlando. I think they're just a really good defense, and they're young and athletic and energetic and well coached, and have been to me the most surprise in kind of the best young team in the league. I mean, maybe outside of OKC,
Mhm.
but more people saw that coming. So yeah, they definitely they're a tough matchup. Hopefully, there's a lot of adjustments that can be made from the last game. We didn't, they didn't have Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis missed the end of that game as well. So hopefully now at full strength they'll be a little bit better. But yeah, that was a tough one. So I don't feel like completely confident that they're gonna pull away. They're undefeated at home right now, so technically they can finish the week with another 3 wins. But I probably wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing much better than I thought they would, and they were obviously trending in the right direction to close out last season, but they've kind of just exploded this year, and they're really hot on the heels of Boston right now. They're right up in the mix. So I'm very curious to see how those matchups play out. But I do appreciate you for coming on, Noah.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
No problem. As I always tell you guys, if you'd like to reach out to me, you know how. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you'd like to be added to It's Cavalier Discord chat, leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of said review to itscavalier53 at gmail.com, and I'll send you an invite. Go Cavs.